and welcome to the final section of our unit on hearing and music. In this section, we're going to look at musical instruments. I want to begin by giving a big thank you to the members of the 2021 Shepherd University Jazz Ensemble and their director, Dr. Curtis Adams, who provided a majority of the sound from musical instruments that you see in this video. To do this, what we're going to do is we're going to begin by looking at what do you see from inside a guitar. So here is a YouTube video where a gentleman has placed a cell phone in the guitar as he's playing, and if you watch the strings, okay, I will let you watch the rest of it on your own. It's very fascinating, but you can see there's definite structure to the waves that are oscillating on these strings. And what we want to do is try to identify what is forming that structure. And for that, we are going to first review so that we have a good understanding of what we're doing. So remember, guitars and all stringed instruments behave like they have matched ends, and therefore they should have all the harmonics. Flute also behaves like it has matched ends and therefore would have all of the harmonics. On the other hand, woodwinds and brass instruments are open-closed, so they're mismatched. So we would expect them to have only the odd harmonics if what we did in the last unit holds true. To do this study, we're going to use a sound card oscilloscope. The one that I'm using in this video is free to download and use for educational purposes. It takes an input through the microphone and then can display the sound as either a graph of intensity versus time or as a graph of intensity versus frequency. The first thing we're going to look at using the sound card oscilloscope is a voice. I'm sorry, but it's my voice. So here is the oscilloscope. Let me put it back into this form. So what you're seeing here is a graph of intensity versus time. Time is on the x-axis, intensity is on the y. So if I go louder, it gets bigger, and if I go quieter, it gets much smaller. Okay? And you can see structure here, much as you saw structure on the guitar strings. If I change over to this version of this graph, this is a graph of intensity on the y-axis versus frequencies on the x-axis. And now it is much easier to see the structure. If I hold a single note, I'm not musical, so bear with me. Oh, you can see very nice structure there. And you could even see a harmonic structure. So if I do that again, oh, there's a peak around between 250 and 500. Double that would be somewhere between 500 and 750. So if we called this 300, that would be at about 600. And then something, over around 1,000 in that realm. So as we would expect from the human voice, you get all harmonics, because remember how your voice is formed. What you have inside are your vocal flaps, which are fixed at both ends, and they oscillate, forming the sound, and then that sound is amplified by your vocal nasal sinus cavities, etc. in your body, which is why when you get a cold and get completely stuffed up, this structure changes, which changes how you sound. So this is the program we're going to use. The next thing we're going to look at is a whistle. And the nice thing about a whistle is it is almost a pure note, perfectly single frequency. So on intensity versus time, you're going to see a sine wave. And on frequency versus time, you're going to see a single peak. After this, we're going to now look at a variety of stringed instruments. I have 4 stringed instruments that we can compare. I have my guitar, which is an acoustic guitar. We have, courtesy of the Jazz Ensemble, also electric guitar, acoustic bass, and electric bass. So beginning with acoustic guitar. So if I play a single note here, you can see the harmonic structure here. And you can again see the all harmonic type nature of this particular note. If I go back to the other view, there we go. What you see here is almost like what you saw when looking in the guitar in the video. It's very similar. From here, we're going to look at electric guitar, acoustic bass, and electric bass. Now let's go look at the brass and woodwind instruments. Trombone. Now a trombone playing the exact same note, but muted. The trumpet. And a muted trumpet. Alto sax. Tenor sax. And clarinet. Now you may have noticed that these are all in our list where they should have mismatched ends. But you saw all harmonics for all of those instruments. So something is up. What is up? We have a hidden assumption. When we derived in the last unit the resonant frequencies for pipes, we assumed that the pipe was a uniform diameter. Most of our woodwind instruments are not. Most of our brass instruments are not. Think about a tuba and how small it starts at the mouthpiece and how big it gets at the other end. All of them do that. Only the clarinet with the bell removed can show you the open-closed resonant structure. So let's go look at that. This website goes through the harmonics of many instruments. I'm going to take a minute with you and look specifically at the flute and the clarinet. So here is the flute. This is playing note F5. It's also the modern B flute. And if you scroll down, you can see a slightly different version of what I was showing you with the sound card oscilloscope, with intensity on this side and then frequency on this axis. And you do get all of the harmonics as you would expect from the flute. If we go and look instead at the clarinet, as we've seen, the clarinet, it's a little, what is it? Okay. If you look at high frequencies like E6, you very clearly see all harmonics. No question there. But if you look at lower frequencies, say D4, you do see all harmonics, but see how the second is much smaller than the first and the third, and the fifth is or the fourth is much smaller than the third and the fifth. So it's the only odd harmonic structure is not there, but you can kind of see how it is present. Similarly with E4, you can see that the second is very repressed compared to the first and third harmonics. So why don't all instruments sound the same? Well, this harmonic structure is what matters. So here I have a flute versus a violin, both playing a D note at 294 hertz. And they're not the same. For the flute, the first and second harmonics are almost equal, and then the higher harmonics are all very small. For the violin, it's almost triangular, where first is high and the second's a little lower and the third's a little lower, and you can kind of see the triangle that I'm trying to look at there. Okay. So the harmonics. Why does a Stradivarius sound better than a regular violin? Because the Stradivarius's harmonics better match the harmonics of the string and produce a better sounding note coming out. So here again, same idea, is looking at different instruments. The top three are playing A at 220 hertz, whereas the bottom three are playing a B flat. Now you may have noticed we've left out an entire part of the band. What about percussion? What about drums and cymbals? It turns out there are resonances there, but they're not as pretty. They're not structured as nicely as for strings and pipes. To give you an idea of this, we're going to go look at one final YouTube video on Chladni plates. Apparently this one played out on me. So what is a Chladni plate? After we get through Tesla here, fast forward. So you can see it's a square plate. Oh, I forgot this had all this intro stuff to it. So let's get to it. And then he puts salt on it. And as it hits a resonance, you can see where the salt gathers in the equivalent of antinodes and leaves the nodes. And you get these beautiful, absolutely beautiful patterns. But again, they're not as systematically found as they were for matched or mismatched frequency chains. And they're quite complex, but beautiful. Again, I will leave you to watch this on your own. What I do have is drum, snare drum, and cymbals from the band. So playing those and looking at them. Drum, snare drum, cymbal, cymbals. There is obviously a lot going on with understanding sound and musical instruments. So I have a couple of resources if you want to learn more. You can go look at The Physics of Sound by Berg and Stork. There is a copy of this book in the Shepherd University Library. When I looked in the library, there are other physics of music and physics of sound books. And if you don't have access to the Shepherd University Library, I would just search for those. The website where we looked at the flute and the clarinet also has a lot of very good information, some of it more technical than others. This concludes our unit on musical instruments. Thank you.